His family watched in horror as his body shut down, piece by piece. 5 senior doctors had failed. Time was running out. The senior consultant whispered the words every family dreads, *, there's nothing more we can do. *. But one young doctor saw something in the darkness, something everyone else had missed. One tiny clue buried in the chaos. One impossible chance. This is the true story of a man who collapsed without warning, a mystery that terrified experienced doctors, and the junior doctor who risked everything to solve it. What happened next changed medicine forever. James Thornton had always been the kind of man people could rely on. At 42, with hands calloused from years of honest work, he was the backbone of his family and didn't even know it. Every morning at 6:30, he'd wake before his alarm, kiss his sleeping wife Sarah on the forehead, and tiptoe downstairs to make tea. The kettle's whistle was the sound that woke the Thornton household, and it had been that way for nearly 20 years. James worked as an electrician in Manchester, running his own small business from a modest office attached to their semi-detached home in Didsbury. He wasn't wealthy, but he was proud. Proud of the way he'd built something from nothing. Proud of how he'd put his daughter Emily through her A-levels without her needing a part-time job. Proud that his 12-year-old son Oliver had everything he needed for his football training. "Dad, can you drop me at school early today?" Emily asked one Tuesday morning in late September, her ginger hair still damp from the shower. "I've got revision group before class." "Course, love," James replied, buttering toast while simultaneously checking his work schedule on his phone. "Ollie, finish your cereal. We leave in 10. Sarah squeezed his shoulder as she passed. "Don't forget, your mum's coming for dinner tonight." James groaned playfully. "How could I forget? She's been reminding me all week about her shepherd's pie." His mother, Margaret, was 78 and lived alone since his father passed. James visited her every Sunday without fail and handled all her bills, repairs, and medical appointments. She depended on him completely, though she'd never admit it. The morning routine was a well-oiled machine. James dropped the kids at school, answered client calls on his Bluetooth whilst driving, and arrived at his first job by 8. He was rewiring a restaurant kitchen in Stockport, a big contract that would finally fund the family holiday to Cornwall he'd been promising for 3 years. "This time it's happening," he'd told Sarah the night before, holding her close. "I've even looked at cottages by the sea. You've always wanted to paint the ocean at sunrise." Sarah had studied art at university but gave it up when Emily was born. James had been saving in secret to buy her a proper easel and professional paints for Christmas. It was a dream he wanted to help her reclaim. That Tuesday seemed like any other. James laughed with his apprentice Danny, ate a meal deal from Tesco for lunch, and rang his mum during his afternoon break. By evening, he was home, hugging his children, teasing Oliver about a missed goal at training. Then, during dinner, it happened. James reached for the water jug and his hand trembled violently. The jug slipped, shattering across the table. Water flooded over Margaret's carefully prepared shepherd's pie. "Sorry, I don't know what," James began, but his words came out slurred, twisted, wrong. Emily's eyes widened. "Dad." James tried to stand, but his left leg buckled beneath him. He gripped the table, confusion flooding his face. "I feel strange. My head." Sarah was beside him instantly, her nursing training from years ago kicking in. "James, look at me. Can you smile?" He tried. Only half his face moved. "Oh God," Sarah whispered. "Emily, call 999. Now." The next hours dissolved into chaos and terror. The ambulance arrived within 12 minutes, paramedics asking rapid questions Sarah could barely answer. Margaret sobbed in the corner whilst Oliver clung to his sister, not understanding why his father's face looked so different, so frightening. At Manchester Royal Infirmary, James was rushed through A&E. The words "possible stroke" echoed through the corridor. Sarah's hands shook as she filled out forms, her mind racing. James was only 42. He was healthy. He didn't smoke. Barely drank. How could this be happening? But the CT scan showed no stroke. We need to run more tests, the registrar said, his face carefully neutral. There's something else going on. By midnight, James's condition had worsened dramatically. The tremor spread to both arms. He developed a raging fever, 40 degrees Celsius. His speech became completely incomprehensible. Worst of all, he started having seizures. Emily held her mother as Sarah broke down outside the ICU. He was fine this morning, Sarah kept repeating. He was absolutely fine. Margaret sat in a plastic chair, aged a decade in a single day. He's all I have, she whispered to no one. My boy is all I have left. Oliver had been sent home with Sarah's sister, but he'd refused to sleep, waiting by the phone, his small world crumbling. By Wednesday afternoon, James had been seen by 3 different consultants. Neurology, infectious diseases, internal medicine. Each ran tests, bloods, lumbar puncture, MRI, EEG. The results created confusion rather than clarity. It's not meningitis, one said. Definitely not a stroke, confirmed another. Could be an autoimmune condition, but the markers aren't matching up, puzzled a third. They started treatments anyway, broad-spectrum antibiotics, antivirals, steroids. Nothing helped. James deteriorated further. The tremors became constant. His fever wouldn't break. His eyes, once so warm and steady, now stared with blank confusion. Sarah stopped eating. Emily stopped going to school. Margaret prayed in the hospital chapel for hours, rosary beads wearing grooves into her palms. The family system that James had held together so effortlessly was collapsing, each member frozen in fear, unable to function beyond the rhythm of hospital visits and terrible updates. The Stockport restaurant rang asking about the unfinished electrical work. Danny, the apprentice, tried to explain but didn't know what to say. Bills began piling up on the kitchen counter at home. The cottage in Cornwall was forgotten. Sarah's surprise easel remained on order, a dream now obscured by nightmare. On Friday evening, exactly 3 days after that terrible dinner, the senior consultant called Sarah into a private room. His face told her everything before he spoke. Mrs. Thornton, we've done everything we can think of. Your husband is not responding to any treatment. His brain function is declining rapidly. We don't understand what's attacking his system, and if we can't identify it soon. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Sarah walked back to James's ICU room, sat beside his tremoring body, and held his hand, the same hand that had made her tea every morning for 20 years, and felt her world ending. In the corridor outside, a young doctor stood watching through the glass window. Her name was Dr. Amelia Clark. And she couldn't look away. Dr. Amelia Clark had qualified only 18 months ago. At 28, she was the youngest doctor on the ward, still learning, still finding her footing in the overwhelming world of hospital medicine. She'd been shadowing the senior team on James Thornton's case since Wednesday, mostly observing, rarely speaking, acutely aware of her inexperience. But something about this case had burrowed into her chest and wouldn't let go. Maybe it was the way Sarah sat by James's bedside every single hour, whispering stories about their life together as if her voice alone could pull him back. Maybe it was the teenage daughter who did her homework in the waiting room because she refused to go home. Maybe it was the elderly mother who brought homemade biscuits for the nurses, desperate to feel useful whilst her son lay dying. Amelia saw them not as visitors, but as survivors of a shipwreck, clinging to wreckage in a dark sea. By Saturday morning, the hospital had brought in Dr. Philip Hargreaves, one of the most respected diagnosticians in the Northwest. He was 63, with 3 decades of experience and a reputation for solving impossible cases. The junior doctors watched him work with something close to awe. He reviewed every test, every scan, every timeline note. He examined James personally, testing reflexes, checking pupils, listening to heart and lungs. Then he ordered a new battery of tests, toxicology screens, rare infection panels, paraneoplastic antibodies, genetic markers. Sarah's hope rekindled. "He's the best," the nurses told her. "If anyone can work this out, it's Dr. Hargreaves." For 2 days, they waited. The results came back Sunday evening. All negative. All normal. All inexplicable. Dr. Hargreaves stood at the nurse's station, a deep frown carving lines into his weathered face. "This doesn't make clinical sense," he admitted to his team. "The symptom progression suggests encephalitis, but there's no infection. It looks autoimmune, but the antibodies are wrong. It presents like toxic exposure, but the screens are clean." He started James on immunotherapy anyway, high-dose immunoglobulins, the kind used when you suspect the body is attacking itself but can't prove it. 2 days passed. James grew worse. The tremors became violent. He could no longer recognize Sarah. His kidneys began to struggle. His liver enzymes climbed. It was as if his entire body was being dismantled from the inside by an invisible enemy. Dr. Hargreaves brought in a colleague from Liverpool, a specialist in rare neurological disorders. She spent 6 hours reviewing the case. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "I've never seen anything quite like this." They tried plasmapheresis next, filtering James's blood to remove potential antibodies. The procedure took 4 hours. It was invasive, expensive, and desperate. It did nothing. By Wednesday, 1 week since that terrible dinner, 5 senior doctors had examined James Thornton. All were baffled. All were running out of options. Amelia watched it all from the periphery. She watched the doctor's confidence slowly crumble into uncertainty, then into something worse, resignation. She watched Emily's face harden, a 16-year-old girl forced to grow up in 7 days. She watched Oliver arrive with his aunt, his small voice asking, "Can Dad come home for my birthday?" and the way Sarah's face cracked before she plastered on a smile and lied, "Soon, darling. Soon." She watched Margaret shrink, grief folding her inward like old paper. On Thursday morning, Dr. Hargreaves had the conversation no one wanted. "Mrs. Thornton, I think we need to discuss making James comfortable." Sarah's face went white. "You're giving up." "We don't know what we're fighting," he said gently. "We've tried everything within our clinical knowledge. At this point, continuing aggressive treatment may be causing more harm than good. Your husband is suffering." "No." Sarah's voice was steel. "No, you don't get to give up. He's 42 years old. He's a father. He's everything. There must be something. I understand this is." "You don't understand." Sarah was shouting now, a year's worth of composure shattered in an instant. "You don't understand because you get to go home tonight to your family. Mine is dying and you're telling me you've run out of ideas? That's not good enough." Emily was crying. Margaret had her face in her hands. Dr. Hargreaves absorbed the outburst with practiced compassion. He'd heard it before. He understood it. "I'm truly sorry," he said quietly. Amelia stood outside the room, her heart hammering. That evening, after her shift, she should have gone home. Instead, she went to the medical library. She pulled James's file, with appropriate access permissions, and spread every test result, every scan image, every clinical note across a table. She read through everything 3 times. The senior doctors were right, nothing made sense. Nothing fit a clear diagnosis. But something nagged at her. It was a feeling more than a thought. A sense that everyone was looking at the picture but missing one crucial detail. She just couldn't see what it was. Over the next 2 days, Amelia did something she knew was risky. She approached Dr. Hargreaves directly. "Sir, I've been following the Thornton case, and I wondered, could I try something?" He looked at her with tired, kind eyes. "Dr. Clark, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but if I can't solve this, I don't think." "I know," she interrupted, then caught herself. "I'm sorry. I know I'm inexperienced. But he's dying anyway. What if we approached it differently? What if we stopped looking for what it is and started looking for what it's pretending to be?" Dr. Hargreaves studied her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he nodded slowly. "You're right that he's dying. And you're right that we're out of ideas." He sighed heavily. "I'll give you access to try one avenue, Dr. Clark. But you need to understand, this family has been through hell. If you offer them hope and fail, that's a cruelty. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" Amelia's mouth went dry. Was she? She thought of James's hand tremoring against the white sheet. Of Sarah's exhausted face. Of Emily growing up without a father. Of Oliver's birthday wish that would never come true. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm prepared." It was a lie. But it was a necessary one. That night, Amelia was granted limited authority to oversee James's treatment under Dr. Hargreaves' supervision. She met with Sarah, who looked at this young doctor with desperate, dying hope. "Please," Sarah said simply. "Please save my husband." Amelia wanted to promise. Wanted to say, "I will." Instead, she said, "I'm going to try everything I possibly can." She started with a different immunosuppressant protocol, one used for a rare condition called Hashimoto's encephalopathy. It was a long shot, but the symptoms had some overlap. She administered it Friday evening. By Saturday morning, James was unchanged. By Saturday afternoon, he was worse. By Saturday evening, the ICU alarms were screaming, and James Thornton was coding. Amelia stood frozen as the crash team swarmed, as they shocked his heart, as they pumped his chest, as Sarah screamed in the corridor. They brought him back. Barely. Dr. Hargreaves found Amelia in the stairwell an hour later, her head in her hands, tears streaming down her face. "I killed him," she whispered. "I almost killed him." "You tried," he said quietly. "Sometimes that's all we can do." "It's not enough." "No," he agreed. "It's not." Amelia went home that night and didn't sleep. She stared at her ceiling and saw James's face. Saw Sarah's hope draining away. Saw Emily and Oliver losing their father because she, a junior doctor with no business taking this case, had been arrogant enough to think she could succeed where experts had failed. She decided to tell Dr. Hargreaves in the morning that she was withdrawing from the case. Then, at 3 in the morning, unable to quiet her mind, she opened her laptop one more time. She pulled up James's very first test results from that terrible Tuesday night. And she saw it. One number. One single value that was barely outside normal range. Everyone had dismissed it because it was so marginal, so seemingly insignificant compared to the dramatic symptoms. But as Amelia stared at that number, something clicked in her mind. A lecture from medical school. A case study she'd read. A rare condition mentioned in passing. Her hand started shaking. "Oh my God," she whispered to her empty flat. "Oh my God, that's it." Sunday morning, Amelia arrived at the hospital before dawn. She'd been awake all night, reading everything she could find, cross-referencing symptoms, checking and rechecking her theory against James's presentation. It fit. It actually fit. But it was so rare, so easily missed, that she understood why 5 senior doctors hadn't considered it. The condition was called Wilson's disease, a genetic disorder where the body couldn't process copper properly. Copper built up in the liver and brain, causing neurological symptoms that could mimic a dozen other conditions. Left untreated, it was fatal. But if caught in time, it was treatable. The key was that first blood test. James's ceruloplasmin level, a protein that carries copper in the blood, had been slightly low. Just barely below normal. In the chaos of his dramatic symptoms, everyone had focused on the brain scans, the inflammatory markers, the infection panels. No one had thought twice about one marginally abnormal number. But Amelia had learned in medical school that Wilson's disease often presented exactly like this, suddenly, violently, in adulthood, mimicking encephalitis or stroke. The neurological damage happened fast. The diagnostic tests were specific but had to be ordered deliberately, they weren't part of standard panels. She needed to check his copper levels, do a slit lamp eye exam looking for Kayser-Fleischer rings, possibly even a liver biopsy. But there was a problem. Time. James had been deteriorating for 10 days now. His kidneys were failing. His liver was struggling. His brain was swelling. If this was Wilson's disease, the copper had been poisoning him for probably years at a low level, then something had triggered an acute crisis. The treatment, chelation therapy to remove excess copper, took time to work. Time James might not have. Amelia found Dr. Hargreaves in his office at 7 in the morning. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "I know what it is," she said without preamble. He looked up, exhausted. "Dr. Clark. Wilson's disease. Copper toxicity." His ceruloplasmin was low on the first test. Everyone missed it because it wasn't dramatically abnormal and his symptoms were so acute. But it fits. Everything fits. She spread her research across his desk, talking rapidly, showing him the case studies, the symptom comparison, the treatment protocols. Dr. Hargreaves listened in silence. Then he pulled up James's file and stared at that first test result, the one from 10 days ago that no one had flagged as significant. "Christ," he breathed. "You might be right." They ordered the tests immediately: serum copper, urinary copper, slit lamp examination. The eye exam was done first. Dr. Hargreaves himself looked into James's eyes using the specialized lamp. There, around the iris, were faint golden brown rings. Kayser-Fleischer rings. The hallmark of Wilson's disease. "Start chelation," Dr. Hargreaves ordered. "Depenicillamine and zinc acetate. And get liver function monitored every 4 hours." Sarah was brought in and told about the new diagnosis. "Does this mean he'll be okay?" she asked, her voice so fragile it could shatter. Amelia chose her words carefully. "It means we finally know what we're fighting. The treatment can work. But Mrs. Thornton, your husband, is very ill. His body has taken enormous damage. Even if we remove the copper, we don't know yet how much permanent harm has been done. And the treatment takes time, days to weeks, before we see real improvement." "But there's hope?" Emily asked from beside her mother. Amelia met the girl's eyes. "Yes. There's hope." The chelation therapy began Sunday afternoon. The medication worked by binding to copper in the bloodstream and allowing it to be excreted through urine. It wasn't fast. It wasn't dramatic. It required patience and faith. Monday came and went. James remained critical but stable. Tuesday arrived. His tremor seemed slightly less violent, but his fever persisted. Wednesday. His kidney function stopped declining. Not improving. Just not getting worse. Thursday. The fever finally broke. Amelia barely left the hospital. She monitored every blood test, adjusted dosages, watched for side effects. Dr. Hargreaves supervised but gave her room to lead. "This is your diagnosis," he told her. "See it through." Friday morning, exactly 2 weeks since James had collapsed at dinner, Amelia arrived to find his ICU room in chaos. Alarms were blaring. Her heart stopped. Not again. Please, not again. She rushed in, expecting the worst. But the nurse was smiling. "He's waking up," she said. Amelia looked at the monitors. Blood pressure stabilizing. Heart rate normal. Oxygen levels good. And James Thornton, who had been unresponsive for days, was moving his head. His eyes fluttered open. "Sarah." His voice was barely a whisper, slurred and weak, but it was a word. A real, comprehensible word. Sarah, who'd been fetched from the waiting room, ran to his side. "I'm here, love. I'm here." "Where? What happened?" "You've been ill. But you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." Amelia stepped back, tears blurring her vision. It was working. The treatment was actually working. Over the next 3 days, James improved steadily. The tremors faded. His confusion cleared. His organs began to recover. By Monday, he was moved out of ICU. By Wednesday, he was sitting up, eating solid food, asking about his children. The copper levels in his blood dropped day by day. The medication was purging the poison that had built up in his system for probably 30 years, undetected, until it had reached a tipping point. Margaret visited and sobbed with joy, holding her son's hand. Oliver climbed onto the hospital bed carefully, hugging his father. Emily just stood there crying, smiling, unable to speak. And Sarah looked at Amelia with such profound gratitude that Amelia had to look away. "You saved him," Sarah said simply. "I just saw something others missed," Amelia replied. "You didn't give up. That's what saved him." 3 weeks after his collapse, James Thornton walked out of Manchester Royal Infirmary on his own feet. He would need to take medication for the rest of his life. Would need regular monitoring. Would need to avoid copper-rich foods. But he would live. He would finish that electrical job in Stockport. Would take his family to Cornwall. Would buy Sarah that easel. Would see Oliver's birthday and Emily's A-level results and his mother's 79th birthday. He would live. On James's last day in hospital, he asked to speak to Amelia privately. "I don't remember much from when I was worst," he said. "But Sarah told me everything. Told me you fought for me when everyone else had given up." "I was just doing my job," Amelia said quietly. "No." James shook his head. "You did more than that. You saw me. Not just a patient. Not just a case. You saw me as a person worth fighting for. You saw my family, what they'd lose. And you cared enough to risk failure." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. "I'm an electrician. Not fancy, but good at what I do. If you ever need anything at all, you call me. Anytime. Day or night. I mean that." Amelia took the card, her throat tight. "Thank you." "No, Dr. Clark." His eyes were bright with emotion. "Thank you. For giving me my life back." 6 weeks later, on a cold November morning, Amelia sat in the hospital canteen with Dr. Hargreaves. He'd bought her a coffee, a small gesture that felt significant. "You've been invited to present the Thornton case at the Regional Medical Conference," he said, sliding a printed invitation across the table. Amelia's eyes widened. "Me? You made the diagnosis. Caught something 5 experienced doctors missed. That's worth sharing." He smiled slightly. "Besides, you're proof that fresh eyes and determination can sometimes see what experience overlooks." "I was lucky," Amelia said quietly. "Luck is part of medicine," Dr. Hargreaves agreed. "But so is caring enough to keep looking when logic says to stop. That's not luck. That's humanity." Amelia thought about that word. Humanity. She'd gone into medicine because she wanted to help people, but medical school had been so focused on science, on facts, on protocols. She'd learned anatomy and pharmacology and pathology. But no one had taught her the most important skill, seeing the person inside the patient. James Thornton hadn't been a collection of symptoms. He'd been a father who made tea every morning. A husband who saved in secret for gifts. A son who visited his elderly mother every Sunday. A man with dreams unfinished and people who needed him. Seeing that, truly seeing that, had made all the difference. It had kept her searching when others stopped. Had made her question when others accepted. Had pushed her past her fear of failure because the cost of not trying was too high. "Dr. Hargreaves," Amelia asked suddenly, "when you decided to let me try treating him, did you actually think I'd succeed?" He was quiet for a moment. "Honestly? I didn't know. But I saw something in you that reminded me why I became a doctor in the first place. Before the years and the failures and the impossible cases wore it down. You still had that fire. I wanted to see if it was enough. And if I'd been wrong? If he died? Then we would have failed together. But at least we'd have failed trying." He met her eyes. The worst thing a doctor can do isn't making a mistake, Dr. Clark. It's giving up whilst there's still a chance. You didn't give up. Amelia nodded slowly, letting that sink in. The following week, she visited James at his home in Didsbury. Sarah had insisted, wouldn't take no for an answer. The house was warm and lived in, filled with the comfortable chaos of family life. Photographs covered the walls, holidays, birthdays, school photos, candid moments of joy frozen in time. James looked better than Amelia had ever seen him. His color was good, his movement steady. He was fully himself again. Dr. Clark. Oliver ran up to her. Dad finished my treehouse. Want to see? Oliver, let the doctor breathe, Sarah laughed, but she was beaming. They had dinner together, Margaret's famous shepherd's pie, made without incident this time. Emily talked about her university plans. Oliver showed Amelia his football trophies. Margaret pressed biscuits into her hands to take home. And James just smiled, quiet and content, watching his family around the table with the profound gratitude of a man who'd nearly lost everything. After dinner, Sarah showed Amelia the dining room, which James had converted into an art studio. An easel stood by the window. Paints lined shelves. Canvases leaned against walls. He surprised me with it last week, Sarah said softly, running her hand over a half-finished painting of a seascape. Said life's too short to put off dreams. It's beautiful, Amelia said. We're going to Cornwall in the spring, Sarah continued. The whole family. James already booked the cottage. She turned to Amelia, her eyes bright. You gave us that. You gave us our future back. Amelia didn't trust herself to speak. As she left that evening, James walked her to her car. I know I already thanked you, he said, but I need you to understand something. Every morning I wake up now, I'm grateful. Every time I hug my kids, every time I hold my wife, every Sunday dinner with my mum, I know those are gifts. Extra time I shouldn't have had. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. You didn't just save my life, Dr. Clark. You saved my daughter's father. My son's hero. My wife's partner. My mother's child. You saved all of those people inside me. And I'll never forget that. Amelia drove home with tears streaming down her face, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude for being part of something so profoundly meaningful. She'd become a doctor to save lives. But James Thornton had taught her that saving a life wasn't just about stopping a heart from failing or fixing a broken body. It was about preserving relationships. Protecting futures. Honoring the invisible threads that connect one person to dozens of others. It was about seeing the electrician who made tea every morning, not just the patient in bed 7. 3 months later, Amelia stood at the regional medical conference in front of 200 doctors and presented a delayed diagnosis of Wilson's disease, a case study in persistence. She walked them through James's case, explaining the missed clue, the diagnostic journey, the treatment protocol. But she also told them about Sarah's breakdown in the corridor. About Oliver's birthday wish. About Margaret's rosary beads. About Emily doing homework in the waiting room. We're taught to be objective, Amelia said to the assembled doctors. To separate emotion from diagnosis. But I think sometimes emotion is exactly what we need. Empathy makes us fight harder. Humanity makes us question protocols. Compassion makes us see what pure logic misses. James Thornton is alive today not because I'm a brilliant doctor, I'm not. I'm junior, inexperienced, and I made mistakes. He's alive because I couldn't walk away from his family's pain. Because I cared too much to give up. That's not weakness in medicine. That's strength. The applause was thunderous. Afterwards, several senior doctors approached her with questions, with congratulations, with offers to mentor her. But the moment that mattered most came from a young medical student at the back. Dr. Clark, I'm in my final year and I'm terrified of qualifying. Terrified I won't be good enough, won't know enough. Your case gives me hope. Is there any advice you'd give? Amelia thought about that night in the stairwell when she'd nearly given up. About staring at test results at 3 in the morning. About the risk of trying when failure seemed certain. My advice, she said gently, is to never forget why you started. Medicine isn't about being perfect. It's about caring enough to keep trying. Trust your instincts. Ask questions. And always, always see the person, not just the patient. The student nodded, writing it down like it was scripture. That evening, Amelia's phone buzzed with a text message. It was a photo from Sarah, James in Cornwall, standing on a beach at sunrise, arms around his children, his mother beside them, all of them grinning at the camera. The message read, "Living the dream. Thank you for making this possible. Forever grateful. X." Amelia saved the photo. On difficult days, and there would be many, she would look at it and remember. Remember that medicine wasn't about always being right. It was about never giving up on the person in front of you. It was about humanity. It was about seeing a trembling hand and fighting to make it steady again. It was about believing that one person, armed with compassion and determination, could change the course of a life. And sometimes, if you were lucky and brave and refused to surrender to despair, you could give a family their miracle. Not because you were the most experienced. Not because you were the most skilled. But because you cared. And in the end, caring was the secret skill that changed everything.